Hi, this is Dr. Emma Offord, host of This Voice is Mine, the Unquiet Podcast. For every neurodivergent mind that was masked, misread or missed, where identity is reclaimed and the system gets named, This Voice is Mine is a podcast for those who were told they were too much, too sensitive, too chaotic, too intense or not enough. Hosted by myself, Dr. Emma Offord, a clinical psychologist, neurodivergent woman and unapologetic system disruptor. This podcast explores what happens when difference is pathologized and what becomes possible when we drop the shame, the script and the medical model. Through stories, reflections and conversations with people who were never meant to fit, This Voice is Mine reclaims the truth of neurodivergent minds, bodies and ways of being. This is not about fixing or fitting in. It's about remembering who we are and unlearning everything they got wrong. Ashlyn is a clinical psychologist with over a decade of experience supporting people through some of life's most challenging circumstances. She began her career working in 2 national specialist rehabilitation centres for people living with chronic and disabling pain conditions before moving into NHS staff support services, where she provided trauma-informed psychological care to frontline healthcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Becoming a mother in 2020 to her son, who was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 3, profoundly shaped both her personal journey and professional direction. Today, Ashlyn not only specialises in physical health, but neurodivergence, working as a neurodivergent assessor, psychological therapist and family coach. She is passionate about helping individuals and families understand neurodivergence through a compassionate, strengths-based lens. Alongside providing neuroaffirming therapy, Ashlyn is especially committed to supporting parents in those early, often overwhelming stages of understanding their child's neurobiology, helping them move beyond fear and uncertainty towards hope, confidence and connection. Her work is grounded in the belief that when families understand the why behind their child's experiences, they are better equipped to advocate, nurture and celebrate who their child truly is. Ashlyn, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Emma.
So, Ashlyn, for our listeners who might not know you too well, would you mind telling us a little bit more about your work and who you are?
Yeah. So I'm a clinical psychologist and also a neurodivergent person. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia very early in my childhood, and I think that really shaped my life in so many different ways and really how I understood myself. And I have always been really interested in how people think and been really, I think, attuned to other people as well. And just curious about pain and struggle. And I think that led me to want to pursue a career in clinical psychology. And then, 5.5 years ago, I had my son, Ted, and he's wonderful and he's also autistic. And I think it's a really challenging, life-altering experience when you have a child who is different, who is just developing in an atypical way, and you're trying to make sense of that. And it's hard to manage all different areas of life, work and home. And so I sort of had to shift and shape my life around my child and his needs. And that led me to leave the NHS and pain rehab, which is what I knew, and to work 2 days a week in a staff wellbeing service, which I loved. I loved working with teams. I really loved how creative that team was and what we were innovating and trying to forge together. But I moved into private practice, and then the stars were aligned for us, and I have wanted to blend the personal and professional increasingly more. And I think if you have a personal lived experience, you just show up to the clients that you support in a different way, with a real depth of care and consideration and experience of what they will be facing, even if their story is different to your own. Often I think the psychological adjustment processes and the sense making and the tensions and struggle, they're all similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So for those of you listening, Ashlyn and I used to work together in the NHS. Part of the work that we did was in gynae oncology and medically unexplained symptoms. And I always talk about how I believe that's where so many neurodivergent bodies went to the medically unexplained psychology department, because people in the medical profession weren't sure what to do with some of these physical expressions of neurobiology. And so, so our kind of breadcrumbs and connections to neurodivergence, and I didn't know my neurodivergence completely when we met either. So we've been on a journey together, haven't we, and separately around neurodivergence. So I knew you before TED. Tell me a little bit more about Ashlyn before TED.
Yeah, I think before I had TED, I think there were two sides of me. I think I've always been quite a serious person, so there was sort of a very somebody that really wanted to do well in life, and I think that stemmed from, if I'm honest, I've thought a lot about it. I think if you're dyslexic 30 years ago, there is still a story that you're stupid or not clever or less than, inferior, etc. And I think I did internalise this view of feeling quite disappointing to lots of people in my circle. And I think how I managed that was to work really, really hard and to get really... that's the bit that I had control over, right? Is how hard I worked and how I applied myself. And I had lots of what we might call them almost safety behaviours to try and be as perfect as possible. So there is this sort of version of me, I think, before TED, who actually was very low in self-esteem and sort of really wanted to do well and knew that to do that I had to work very hard. So there's that part as a thread, and there's quite a significant time cost to all these safety behaviours of like checking and sort of really investing lots of time to be able to do everything as is. And then there's this other part that I think is a more thinly told story, that actually I'm quite a playful person and I'm quite spontaneous, and I can go through a phase in my life where I become quite into exercise and decide that my first triathlon is a half Ironman, or that I've just been offered a place on a doctorate. So a good idea is to spend like 6 weeks like trekking the Inca Trail and going to Costa Rica and doing a yoga retreat in the jungle. So I have these kind of two sides that sometimes are in tension, where this is this very sort of considered part and also a part that's quite spontaneous and likes to play. And I think when you have an autistic child, and every autistic child is different, but certainly from our experience, things need to be really thought through, and I need to think a lot about whether the environment is going to be the right fit for TED, whether it's going to create too much friction. And so that spontaneity bit has been harder to access and hold on to, and it's invited probably that more serious, considered part to take hold. And I think sometimes I find that difficult, and I'm still wrangling now with where the sweet spot is of being able to show up to TED as I truly want to, and also not lose the part of Ashlyn that I think I love and I think makes me me.
So I'd love to hear more about that. What I want to take us back to a little bit was what you were talking about in terms of striving to do really well, and that somehow being part of your experience of being neurodivergent and other people's response to your neurodivergence. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Yeah,
absolutely. So I was diagnosed as being dyslexic, we think around age 7 to 8. I was asking my mum about this yesterday on the train. But there was always quite a lot of worry about me in the household. So to give you a bit of background, I'm a only child, And my parents sort of had me later in life, and they're very sporty people, like very agile people. And there's lots of stories about sort of, my dad played Division 1 table tennis, so he would take me outside at 3 or 4 to practice playing tennis. My mum played for the county. I should be good at like racket sports. I just wasn't. I was just really clumsy, found it really difficult to coordinate my body in useful ways. They felt quite disappointing to my family in that sense, and quite different from them. And then I started school, and I really struggled to be able to read and write. And I was really attuned. I knew I was different to other people kind of early doors. And I knew that there was a lot of worry in the household about that. So my bedroom sort of was very close in proximity to the kitchen. And I remember hearing conversations that my parents would have now I understand it from very much a place of worry, but this real sense of, what kind of job is she going to get if she can't spell fish? She starts with a PH. And to me, spelling fish with a PH makes perfect sense if you're spelling phone with a P and H.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So I think my early experience was one of being aware that my parents were very worried about me, and often feeling like I was, whether this is true or not, my perception was I was quite a disappointing child to them. Where I thrived, and I think what really helped me, was I was naturally very good at art. And I went to a village primary school where every year we would have art competitions, and the vicar would come over and decide out of all of these collections of pictures who was going to win that year. And every year I would win. And that, being good at art, was incredibly helpful to me. And it was a place where I saw a lot of pride in my dad. So he had an artist friend at work, and he would take some of my work in and show him. And my parents would frame some of these pictures that I would kind of do in school. They would frame them around the home, and my dad would be always very interested in what I was doing from an art sense. And so I think if you have a dyslexic child, the tendency is to try and make that weakness better, or an individual strength. And I would really encourage parents, go after what they're good at, try and preserve that self-esteem, and trust that you can be a late bloomer. I really think I bloomed. It really wasn't until I went to college and university that I bloomed. And I think by anyone's metric, I've done quite well in life. And I think you just got to hold steady and cultivate your child's interests and what they're good at, and just bide your time. I think would be, my advice. But I think that experience of struggle, and everything has been a struggle. I taught myself to sight read. If you looked at my handwriting, it's all italic. That's really deliberate, so you can't see each letter. That was often wrong.
Yeah.
I used to, when I was at college, write all of my essays out on a computer because it had a spell checker on, and then I would copy it across. So I managed in some ways to lose that dyslexic identity. And I did read a lot. And if you do that, you can sight read pretty well.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you're looking at maps and things with different, this is where it comes more unstuck, with different counties that you don't know, so then I can't do that sort of very well. But I think that experience of really struggling, finding things difficult, it meant that when I had Ted, who had high support needs and was developing language differently, and I would describe him as minimally speaking. We've got probably less than 10 words that he's able to use in an audible way where we would understand him. And he has never had a friend, and doesn't interact with peers at all, and isn't at a mainstream school. I think my own experience of being a late bloomer and finding things hard and being able to persist, I think that has been a real gift in how I've been able to show up for Ted and to see all that he is rather than all that he is unable to do yet or finds hard.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. I want to hear more about that, because lots of people that we work with, and your own experience and guests that we've had on the podcast have talked about so many different stages of parenting and emotions through the kind of understanding their child was different through the diagnosis, and actually having to learn what that neurodivergence is for their child rather than falling into the stereotype. So tell me more.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think I'm going to start here because I really want to give you a layered response. So I've told you a little bit about my experience sort of growing up of struggling, I think has allowed me to just be able to celebrate largely what Ted can do and go after his interests and try and kind of weave learning through that. I think my husband, we're like yin and yang. We're really different as people, and I think that's what can make us work. But he is somebody who has not struggled in the same way, was very academic. He had what I would call quite a chocolate box life growing up, where there wasn't really a sort of any adverse experiences that he went through, and he was good at sports. He was part of the rugby lot a bit, but also very academic. So I think for him, this was his first experience of real deep psychological pain and deep struggle to know how to support Ted if through your life things have become easier or been sort of easy. So I think there's a real tension, or that's been a different experience and process for him. I know that we're really aligned in this, and something that we talk about in our Divergent Life team is very much we see neurodivergent parents as the ultimate green flag. Like, I really do see that. There isn't a neurodivergent person that I've met who I don't think is resilient as, even if they can't see it, even if they're struggling with things, and we really see that. There is such a strength in being able to persist and try to find different ways to be in the world that are really workable for that individual. And so I think we really see that in our work, is this ability to just hold steady and keep at it and show up with great empathy and will and advocate, because perhaps parents, and I would include myself in this, aren't just advocating for their child, but you're also perhaps reparenting yourself through this a little bit too.
Absolutely, yeah.
I do think that's a little bit of what I've done. So whenever I see Ted, I make it a point of saying, it's so great to see you. And when I'm struggling on my hardest day, I really dig deep into my bottom line is I just want to connect with you.
Yeah.
So whatever you're up for doing, even if that is spending 3 hours on the trampoline, I'm down with that. And I'm going to look like it's pure joy for me. Yeah. Because I think you don't have anything without connection. And if you can create psychological safety, well, that is from what everything is formed from. And so when I strip everything back, I just try and meet him where he's at. But coming back to the next layer of your question, which I think is the emotional response from my husband and I was entirely different, even though I think our experience of grief was very similar. And I think we were simply grieving the child and life that we imagined that we would have, and the journey that we thought we were going on, and the journey that we're actually on has a lot of worry in it about Ted's future, our future. It has a lot of pressure to try and develop him, but avoid burnout and all of the kind of the struggles. But I think what I did, which is very classic Ashlyn, is I'm going to turn the world upside down and try and learn everything I can about autism. And I'm going to do courses in America, and I'm going to really try and understand people's voices who are autistic, not sort of professionals of the academia aspect of it, but I'm going to read books that's written from a perspective of lived experience, and I'm going to follow people online who are actually parents, and I'm really going to try and understand this to do something perfect. And I think what Mark did that was completely different was, this is really horrible and painful, and you've got that covered, so I'm going to do something else, and I'm going to pick up extra shifts at the hospital, and we're going to sort of pay for this MDT team that you're creating and these very expensive courses that you're going on. That's how I can help. And I think we see that a lot in our families, where there becomes a parent that's holding a lot of the emotional, mental load, that's going to all of the appointments, that's feeling naked under a spotlight every time they go, like fear of gaslighting or being misunderstood. I think that can create a friction and tension between families, because you just feel like you're holding up the sky, and you're both navigating your emotions in a different way. And for me, I'm a psychologist, right? So I think talking is immensely helpful. So I just want to talk all of the time about what I'm learning or thinking about. But actually what I understand now, what I was doing, was sometimes I was avoiding too. I was getting stuck in a textbook for the answer. And actually, every autistic person is different. And Ted is my best teacher. And if I can stay observant and curious about Ted's experience and follow his lead, he often guides me much better to the answer of how to show up or be, or connect with him, or help him grow in all senses of that, so much more usefully than ever any kind of textbook does. So I'm in this process of, I think, finding the sweet spot, and sometimes oscillating in the wrong direction. But now I think what me and Mark are good at, and it's taken a long time and we've had some really difficult experiences together, what we're really good at is teaming, is coming back now and communicating and talking about the hard bits. And there's more than one I in identity, right? So we have moved from this place of wrapping our happiness entirely around Ted and where he gets to in life, to instead recognising that success is not really in the outcome, but is in the process, and trying to have the fullest, richest, most meaningful life we can, and not let go of the things we really wanted in life, but instead work to support each other, to make sure we're getting some of that. So he will be very embracing of friendships are really important to me, like go out and see your friends, and he really benefits from time alone. Like how can I get Ted and I out for a bit so that you can have a bit of time in your pants, just wafting around, being, because that's really helpful for him. But I think every journey is different, but lots of the work that we do, we see sort of families really struggling with that additional tension that doesn't exist in the same way, I think, if you don't have a neurodivergent child.
And it is very, very common for parents of a neurodivergent child to have real struggles to not, stay together in the end. And I think a lot of the themes that we see are around not understanding each other's responses, seeing that working extra as avoidance and sort of abandonment and not caring even, and not understanding that maybe felt like the only reliable thing that someone can do in that moment, because there's so much psychological navigation, isn't there? Not just around your child, but around the adjustment in the relationship around your child. And it all comes at once.
It does. And I think for us, we've been together since we were 15. So we've been together like 20 plus years. And in that time, I've been the hot mess of the relationship. I've been the one where I found things difficult and I've struggled, and I've benefited from talking that through. And Mark's been able to be the supportive rock that knows deep down, you've got this, you're just wobbling, and this is part of your process. And so those reciprocal roles start to shift, where actually you're now both up against something
Yeah.
really, really difficult and really challenging for just both of you to know how to be. And I think Mark then couldn't step into that rock position for me at points, and he's human, nobody probably could. And I didn't know how he needed me to be for him. So I think that just left him not knowing where to go. And I think before, he would say his person is very much his mum, and they have this incredibly beautiful relationship. But I think we were on a different grief timeline to the grandparents, who perhaps just got there later. So I think he also felt it was, I think we both did, difficult to go to grandparents for support, because they wanted us to see all that he was, and was super positive about Ted, as they absolutely should be, but in a way that minimised what we were noticing that we were worried about, that led everybody just a bit stuck and holding their own experience without much of an outlet. And so I think then there is this real navigation piece that takes place, because your relationship shifts massively, doesn't it, when you have children?
Yeah.
And I think although we'd come together young, one of us wanted to do medicine, one of us wanted to do clinical psychology. They're both careers that demand quite a lot of you, and often involve like moving around the country for jobs and opportunities and rotations, etc. And so we were quite used to being independent in a sense, but you can't access that if nobody else can look after your child, or you can't village with other families. If your child, I remember going to a picnic once, my friend had tried to do something lovely for my birthday, and we'd gone to just a regular picnic outside with another family with a child of a similar age, and a couple. And Ted found the whole experience so overwhelming that he was just running up and down in a straight line, stimming, for like maybe an hour and a half. He couldn't interact with the child in any way, and he was just retreating into his own world. And that's really difficult if so many experiences start to become unavailable to you, because the cost for your child is days of dysregulation, is a complete loss of language, or a complete loss of toileting, or you start to go, I can't do that, and it starts to say no to stuff.
There's a couple of things I want to follow through with that, but what's coming to my mind is how you and I have had these conversations about the spectrum, essentially. So many different profiles and presentations and experiences of neurodivergence, of autism, and hearing you describe what happened there at this picnic. To me that sounds like that was a very dominant situation. It took over. You probably had to make a decision about what to do, and then thereon you're saying things change, and you have to really consider environment. You have to really plan social events and all kinds of different things. Where we also know there are presentations of neurodivergence where there might not be quite the same experience. Somebody might go home and have a meltdown rather than having something happen there at the picnic. Or, somebody might just have maybe more of an OCD episode around going to those kind of events, and have to have rituals and compulsions that enable them to be in that social event. There's such variety and expression of neurodivergence. So, I kind of wanted to bring that point up, really, that we're neurodivergent, you and I, and people might make assumptions of us because we're clinical psychologists that everything is easy, but we can still also occupy the neurodivergent space as well. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there right now about different, like the impact on families, the impact on individuals. It's not always visible. Sometimes it is. It's not always obvious assumptions can be made, but it's such a hard thing to navigate, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think over time, ideas and concepts kind of shift, and I think we are moving in the right direction of moving away from this very narrow, stereotypical view of what autism looks like, which is really based on this kind of white male profile that has been spoken about a lot. And we're starting, but I very much say starting, to understand more nuanced presentations. But I think what has happened, really sadly, is that whilst there has been, I think, the correct movement of now being able to identify individuals that were previously missed and help create a context for them to understand their kind of struggles, their very real struggles, I think what has also happened is society has not caught up yet. And if you can't see it, it isn't true.
Yeah.
I think that just seems to be the narrative. And so now there's this real tension, I think, that exists between, if I didn't see your child having a meltdown at that picnic and they're just, I don't know, like walking around with a stick pretending it's a sword, well, then that is your bad parenting.
Yeah.
That's not your child looking to create like repetition or move their body to try and regulate themselves in those more kind of subtle ways that can fall under the radar. And I think we have to be really careful that we don't focus solely on the manifestations of autism being these more sort of overt sort of expressions. And I would very much put Ted in that camp. If you spend 30 seconds with him, you would recognise that he's autistic. And sometimes that's deeply helpful for me because actually sometimes people, if he bumps into people or he does things which others would consider socially off, they give us a lot of latitude. And I think for other parents and people, that compassion is just not afforded in the same way.
Yes, yeah.
And so I think we have to be careful as well. We've spoken about this many times, about within our community, there's a lot of internal tension.
Yeah.
On this one end, I think correctly, both are valid, there is a sense of people really wanting to help others recognise that they're different. They're not less, they're different in accommodations. And if we can make those environmental changes, people can thrive.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I'm pro that, and I will hold that really tightly until I'm blue in the face. And there, I think, is another depiction of autism where individuals perhaps with children with very high support needs are saying, we can change the environment all day long, but my child has got global developmental delay, or is intellectually disabled, or is medically complex with other co-occurring difficulties, and that's not going to be enough. And that just minimises the struggle that we're in and our unique challenge. And both are valid and both are true. And as society, we need to hold both.
Yeah.
And we need to, I think, trust in people's lived expert experience of what they need, and work to support that, hold that level of flexibility for them, rather than oscillating between we need this or we need this. We need both.
Yeah, because you yourself, your story is one of someone who had struggles and challenges and found ways and alternative ways and outsmarted the system in you know, all kind of unique, you know, different ways of providing yourself with that education.
Yes.
But it wasn't easy for you, and I imagine those assumptions are made of you that it is easier for you to navigate things compared to somebody else. But and people might not know about your neurodivergence. They might assume you couldn't possibly be neurodivergent in any way because you're a clinical psychologist. So you know, it is a very different experience, isn't it? But your story is so unique because not only in your work but in your personal life, you are both the in-betweener, kind of yourself, and then you have a son with high support needs. So I see in your work how you can see all these different perspectives and hold them. So it is possible
Yeah.
for people in this world
It
to
is.
to see both, hold both, value, validate both different experiences. And I'm saying both different experiences. And I know
Yes.
that's,
Ooh. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
of really reducing that down. But yeah, I think it is entirely possible. And that's the work that we do, isn't it? All
Yeah.
the time. That is the
Yeah.
work that we do and that we believe in. And I think for me, I can just not unsee everything that I see in the therapy room. I cannot unsee the lack of safety that so many people have experienced, or
Yes.
the consequences for them to be fitting in. Like, all of that is valid and true. And so
Yeah.
it might take a bit more digging
Yeah.
to uncover that story and understand it, because it might have been masked. They might have found ways. It isn't as visible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it might be harder to raise their voice in that sense. But I think when you hear those stories, it's undeniable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It becomes undeniable, those personal struggles. And I think people would also make the same assumption of me, that, well, you've achieved being a clinical psychologist, so everything else probably went that way as well.
Yeah.
And it really isn't the case. And becoming a clinical psychologist doesn't change it either. Things still become
No.
continual struggles as well.
Yes, they absolutely do.
Yeah. So I was thinking what you were saying there about becoming a mum. We all know becoming a mum, brings its own
Yeah.
challenges. There's so much talk about matrescence and really, holding that into the light. And I'm really happy to hear that is being vocalised so much more, and all that comes with that. I'm curious about your adjustment at that time, and were you already picking up signs that there were maybe additional support needs early on for Ted?
Great question. So Ted was born in September 2020, so we were still very much in COVID times, and Mark's an anaesthetist, so he was ventilating a lot of COVID patients. We're both only children, so Ted was the first baby in our family. There was no other babies to kind of reference, and I wasn't seeing any babies, because even when when lockdown started to lift, because Mark was still in the hospital working with COVID patients, and thankfully at that point he did have some PPE, I was really aware of our situation, and that we might be sort of asymptomatic. So I was quite careful about where we were going for a long time. So I think I didn't have much data about the trajectory of development in babies. Of course I did from an academic sense, but actually in terms of physical milestones, smashing it. He sat really early, he crawled really early, he walked really early, he objectively loved being with me. We had a really lovely connecting bond. Always invested a lot of time in him. I took being a mother very seriously, and I wanted to show up very wholeheartedly, and sort of would always be trying to play and sort of be with him. I absolutely did notice that I had a child that when we started to emerge from lockdown, and I had this lovely group of women, I started doing baby massage that I met. Mine always seemed to be up against more. That's the only way I can describe it. That I co-slept with Ted till he was 3.5. I wouldn't have done that, but our family needed sleep, and that was the only way to get it. And he cried more. He was more unsettled. He wasn't so interested in other babies and children. He absolutely loved books. So him and I would spend hours and hours doing different Julia Donaldson's books. And he was really good at counting, and he knew all his like the letters by 2. So I thought that and I'm sure I still do, I still think this in my heart, that I just thought I had this amazing bright spark. He was just gonna develop in this very non-spiky way that be brilliant in all areas, right? And then I started to see language differences were the first things I noticed in Ted. So The Gruffalo was one of his favourite books. If I turned that round and said, which is your favourite character, he would just recite the page. So he had in some ways a lot more language than other children who were going from like single words to short collections of words and then sentences. He was giving me sentences, but he couldn't answer basic questions. And there was a lot of echolalia. And the best way to describe it, I mean, his language had real meaning for him. He would drop something on the floor and go, "Down," cried the witch, because in Room on the Broom, when she falls from the sky. So I kind of learned over time that, I'll give him the language that you think he's trying to kind of communicate. So I would say, "It's fallen down." And then after a while, he might absorb that and drop something and go, "It's fallen down," in this quite kind of scripted way. But I guess that was the first sign. And then I took him for a couple of mornings to our local village preschool, and the nursery manager pulled me to one side after he'd been there for about a term and said, "I've noticed some developmental differences in Ted." And I was really defensive, if I was honest. I was really like, I don't think he's autistic. I had a child that was deeply connected to me and sort of gave really good eye contact and wanted to play and could play with lots of different things. And it just wasn't this narrow idea that I imagined autism would be at that sort of early age. But actually, between 2 and 3, we sat in this very difficult, uncertain patch. It's probably the hardest period of my life, I think, was not knowing and wondering.
While you were waiting for the diagnosis?
I think while we were... So, yes, we were on an NHS pathway at that point and waiting. Bristol said it could take up to 3 years to receive a diagnosis. So on that pathway. But also, we were torturing ourselves in terms of everything that Ted would do, we would analyse. Was that a flap? Does the fact that he so loves books and isn't so interested in cars or dinosaurs, is that sort of a narrowing of interest? There were so many questions that we were asking of ourselves.
Which you didn't have before.
Which we didn't have before. And then I think what would happen, probably where things really started to shift for us, was we started to have families over that had children of a similar age, and we would observe them, and they would be very different from Ted. We started to see in live form this spiky profile where he would be as good, if not better, at some things than other kids, but then would have real struggles in other ways. And struggles like coming outside to inside was really difficult. He loved music, but I took him to this dancing tots group, and it was of course really loud. So it's the same music he loves, but really loud, and I think this is going to be an absolute win for us. And he just goes around hitting all of the other children, and I think that was a really smart thing to have done, because he was trying to get me to take him out of it. But in trying to be a good parent that doesn't understand this at all, I sit him on the corner high up on some seats and say, "We are staying here, but I'm going to make sure that other children are safe, and you'll miss biscuit time." And I look back at that and I feel so sad for Ted and me in that, thinking that I am doing some natural consequences to a sort of behaviour that we don't want to see. And now I understand that as my son's really dysregulated and he's trying to find an out. And so I understand some of what was happening differently. But in answering your question, I think language differences, we didn't have any gestures. We didn't have waving or kissing goodbye or nodding or shaking one's head. And over time, his interests have become more narrow, and stimming has really increased for him. And we're flexing our environment a lot to try and make it more low demand and to try and meet him where he's at, whilst not preventing behaviour that is very regulating and calming and soothing for him.
And what kinds of environmental changes have you made that where you've seen the regulation return to him.
Yeah. So Ted has a body, I think he's an ADHD, but he's not 6 yet, so I can't get an ADHD diagnosis. But I can really see the tension between these neurotypes. He's got a body that loves to move. He's often seeking proprioceptive input, so he loves to bounce. He loves crashing games. It is like he's wired by a motor. There is no other way to describe him. And very early, I took him to see an OT with decades of experience in sensory integration. And she did this very detailed OT assessment, thinking about the 8 senses, and made lots of recommendations within the home. So we've got an indoor swing. I bought a massive trampoline, like it's like 18 foot, got it shipped from the Netherlands. It's huge, so that I could bounce with him.
Yeah.
And so we could talk together as we bounce about big bounces, little bounces. We could talk about changes in direction. We could talk about bouncing on one leg. We could sort of practice this more body connective part, because copying's really hard for him. Getting him to move his body in non-spontaneous ways is really difficult. So for us, having swings, having places that he can crash, where we'll throw him onto the bed and turn him upside down and do tickles, and him having a big peanut ball and fidget toys has been really helpful. So our home does look like a sensory gym, very deliberately. Because every room I want him to have access to fans or just a different sensory input that helps him feel good. And he's brilliant at seeking it out. And I think you've got to trust your child's ability to be able to do that.
So for those parents who are listening who might be kind of early on in their journey, might be waiting on that waiting list to find out if their child is neurodivergent, and looking for answers because they're full of uncertainty, struggles, like you said, going through this grieving process. There's not going to be one piece of advice we can offer them. There's not a one size fits all for any of this.
No.
But is there anything that you would share about your journey?
Yeah, I think the thing that has really helped me is staying connected to my values. So sometimes I'll ask myself, if Ted was 16, I'll catapult him forward to a big birthday. And in whatever way is in keeping with Ted, whether that's on an AAC device, whether that's writing his experience, whether it's speaking it, if he stood up and said something about the kind of mother that I'd been to him, what am I hoping he would say? And I intentionally try and lead with those qualities. So I want him to experience me as somebody that is caring, that is attuned, that loves him without limits, that sees all that he can do and all that he is. And every now and again, I periodically across the month will check in. How closely am I living and in line with that? And what action can I take that might enable me to make a pigeon step closer towards that? So I think being able to come back to my values and use them very much as a compass has been really helpful. And in difficult moments where we're really up against it, the other thing that I found really helpful is looking at his hands. So he has really small, he's 5, he's got really small hands. And I find that in the moment where difficult passengers are showing up for me, very human passengers of willing this moment to pass, and why can't we just be here already? I think looking at his hands and just remembering how small he is. His frontal lobe isn't fully developed till he's 25. Like, he's got this nervous system that is experiencing a lot of environmental friction. Often I can make sense of his challenges and struggles as a context. And I go back to me and go, how do you want to show up in the face of this? How do you want to be known and experienced by him? And almost always that helps me soften and meet him at a different place, at a more loving, supportive place. And it's not always perfect. Sometimes, we're all human. We get up against our own stuff and hooked by it, and it's not perfect. But most of the time, it's pretty good. And that has been the single best thing I found helpful. So I would encourage people to think about their own values. When that first tiny baby was born, and you had all these hopes for them and all these hopes for yourself, and probably had a moment of making promises about how you were going to be, come home to that, because that will guide you. And I have found, theoretically, a model of grief known as a dual processing model, which has this idea that there are two poles. There's a loss orientated response and there's a restoration orientated response. Really helpful that in those early grief, I'm going to say years because I think it is years, we oscillate between being really hooked by the loss of imagining that we were in Italy and buying a guidebook for that and ending up in Holland, and having to come to terms with that and see all that Holland has. I think we oscillate a lot between that, feeling that loss really deeply, and then moving to right, what action can I take to have the best life that we can? And there's something about knowing that's a really normal response many times a day of feeling okay one minute and that the sky's falling in on the other. And so my advice would be, compassion starts with you, and being able to notice those moments of swing and being able to name them and being able to stay connected to things that make you feel good as a parent is going to be so important and anchoring.
Yeah.
Don't lose those.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. So we're pretty much at the end of our episode, Ashlyn. Have you brought in an object to share with the listeners today?
Yeah.
What have you brought in?
Yeah, so I've brought in a poem that I found incredibly helpful and anchoring, and I referenced it a little bit there in my depiction of Italy and Holland. And it's quite a well-known poem by Emily Pearl Kingsley. She wrote it in 1987 called Welcome to Holland. And if it's okay, I wanted to read it out.
Yes, please.
So here it goes. I'm often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and you make wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondoliers in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The flight attendant comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." "Holland, you say?" "What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you somewhere horrible, disgusting, filthy, full of pests, famine and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they've had. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you might never be free to enjoy the very special, lovely things about Holland.
Well done. Yeah, that was really, you got me going.
Oh, it gets me every time.
That's beautiful. And I just think, you know, it just represents everything that you've talked about in this whole episode. It's not suggesting that, you know, we can't grieve Rome. We can't,
Yes.
you know, we can grieve Italy, but we don't want to not see the beauty of Holland.
Totally that.
And yeah, that's really, really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're so welcome.
And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, we'll have you back for sure. There's more to tell.
Thank you, Emma.